Hi, everybody. Welcome to the PC Perspective Podcast. This is the 184th episode, recorded on January 4th, 2012, and I got the year right. I'm Ryan Shrout.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I still sign my checks 2011, and I'm Josh Walrath.
And I'm Alan Malventano.
Apparently, he doesn't sign checks. And in Canada, I don't think it's 2012 yet. I think because of their Thanksgiving holiday switcheroo.
No, we switched with Samoa. We got there first, too.
Oh, I thought it was still like 2008 or 2009. No. So it is the first podcast of the new year. It's also the first podcast, last podcast, I guess, before our demise, a.k.a. CES 2012 in Las Vegas. So we've got a few things to get through. Not a huge week in terms of news. We had a lot of stuff we talked about last week because we took one of the weeks for the holidays off. We already talked about 7970. We'll have more about that coming up soon. Hopefully at the CES podcast, the first one, I'll be able to talk about some Crossfire results if Matt gets through some testing and that kind of stuff. So we'll just have to see how that goes. However, let's a couple of quick things. Matt actually posted a review. Matt Smith posted a review of the K53T Asus notebook. This is actually a Llano based notebook, so it's kind of interesting. We haven't, we do a lot of notebook reviews now. We almost all kind of based on Sandy Bridge for the most part, and a couple of the small form, or not the small form factor, the Atom-based type designs netbook. There we go. That's what I was looking for. So this is an A6 3400M, 1.4 gigahertz, 6 gigs of memory, 500 gig hard drive, 15.6 inch screen, kind of a low res screen though, 1366 by 768, kind of standard, I guess. Although it's priced at just over $650, I guess, on Amazon. So it doesn't quite fall into what I consider a budget notebook, but it's fairly good. I'm not going to go through all the details here, other than I'll say that it actually came out. Matt really liked the design. He really liked kind of the aesthetics of it and the build of it, but there are some other options from Asus, kind of based on almost the exact same chassis, that are a little bit lower price, maybe offer a little bit better performance. It's still got a gold award, right? So it's still a pretty good machine. Although you can get it, I think he says he recommends the Asus A53TA found on Newegg. It appears to be the same chassis, almost identical hardware as the K53T, but comes with a little bit less RAM, and it's about $50 less in terms of cost. So depending on where you go, this is kind of one of the troubles with buying notebooks. I get that question a lot in our emails and stuff is, hey, what's the best $800 laptop? And there's like 500 options. And it's even more confusing because a company like Toshiba or even Asus or those guys, they'll have a different model number to sell at Office Depot, to sell at Amazon, to sell at Best Buy, and all these different model numbers are essentially almost identical hardware, even if they kind of change the numbers and letters around. So it's important to do your reading, do your research, see what's going on there. So you can check that out on the website, still on the homepage there. And then if you are
it's kind of an example why AMD does need to hire a marketing team. Because, this, apart from my video freezing, this is a gaming laptop. If all you're going to do is game with it, you don't really care about processing power, you don't care about general computing tasks, you pair one of these Llanos with a discrete GPU from AMD, and for half the price of an Alienware, you can be gaming. You're not gaming at high, but you're gaming.
No. Yeah, but that's true. I mean, you get the benefit.
Compared to the Intel of the equivalent, the
integrated graphics on this is definitely better. Yeah.
Yeah. So AMD, get on that.
Yes, indeed. Unfortunately, they let all their marketing people go.
Oops.
Seasonic Platinum 80 plus rated 1,000-watt power supply. Lee did a review of that. If you are looking to overpower your system, looking to get 2, 3, maybe even 4 graphics cards if you're super crazy. This is a fully modular design for you. It did get an Editor's Choice Award. It has a 7-year warranty. It's kind of like almost unheard of in the power supply world. And then we'll talk with Alan about why that may never be the case in the storage world again. But it does have a 1,000-watt continuous DC output. He was impressed with the efficiency, voltage regulation, low AC ripple, which just essentially means it's a good quality power supply. Silent, fanless operation at lower power levels. Obviously not 1,000-watt level. The fan will spin there. And the single 12-volt output can deliver 83 amps of power. So, and actually this has, I know, 6 PCIe connectors.
At 80 plus
so
platinum.
you can only support, right, yeah, which is pretty impressive. Price, however, it's not stupid expensive, about $250 to $260. It's up there for a power supply. And you do pay more for the 80 plus platinum level. You know, you kind of have this rule of diminishing returns in terms of how much efficiency benefit you get per dollar as you go up in those ratings. So, but it's a really nice power supply if you're looking to build a high-end gaming rig. Check out that review as well. Now, next up, Josh, you wrote up a little review editorial type thing of some G.Skill memory. This was 16.
No, I didn't. No. You must be thinking of somebody else.
It's got your name on the story.
Are you sure it wasn't Jeremy?
Yeah,
Jeremy's
sure
all
you.
about memory.
But you like
Memory
Ripjaws.
man.
Yeah, but you like ramming so much more.
Well,
Touche.
touche.
So tell us
Yes.
about your ramming experience with G.Skill.
Okay, well, you know, G.Skill's been a name that has been around for a while. Not so much in ramming, but, well, yes, in ramming. And they sent off a quad of DIMMs for me to test out. These, at the time, were DDR3 1866 Ripjaw X series 4x4 gigabyte products. So 16 gigs of memory in your hand if you've got, you know, good enough grip. And you like red and some black, and you know, DIMMs that are hard to fit into most slots. But I digress. Anyway, as we have gone through time and look back at the dinosaurs, no, I think I can go forward a little bit farther than that. No, DDR3 memory has not been very excited for a long, long time. It first came out. Didn't offer that much more than DDR2. And in fact, DDR2 didn't offer that much more than DDR. It wasn't until we got to DDR2 800 and 1066 modules that we began to see a difference in performance. Same thing can be said about DDR3. The original, 1066 stuff and the 1333, it didn't offer all that much more than the previous DDR2 generations. And that kind of stayed that way, even though DDR3 allowed higher memory speed, greater densities over time. It just was not that exciting because it just didn't offer more. And the problem with that is that the CPU architectures that we had from both Intel and AMD really didn't utilize DDR3 to its full potential. Now we are at a time where we have Sandy Bridge E, Bulldozer, and Llano-based processors that will utilize as much bandwidth as DDR3 can provide. And so we now have a new excuse to actually get excited about memory. The other excuse is that the densities are just becoming sick. I believe this was on special for $90. You get 4x4 gig sticks, so 16 gigs of memory for $90. You can get 2x8 gig DIMMs for around $80. It's just absolutely insane, the densities that we have for memory. And let me tell you, Windows 7 and a lot of new games can actually use that. Not to mention some applications that people may or may not use in the professional space. But still, we're talking densities of memory that were previously, seen in server racks for just hundreds and thousands of dollars. And now we can get it for $120 or less. It's absolutely amazing. So G.Skill makes these modules. I paired them with a Llano processor, the A8-3850, which is now their number 2 performance product in the Llano series, surpassed by the A8-3870K, which Ryan has. Very exciting stuff. But the combination of the quad-core CPU and the GPU on the Llano, it really does suck up the memory bandwidth. I was able to test this out in a couple of applications, and when you start using graphics in any kind of meaningful way, you get a pretty significant jump from going from DDR3 1333 to DDR3 1600 to the full DDR3 1866 speeds. I mean, you go from 3858 in 3D Mark with 1333 up to 4594 with 1866. I mean, it's a huge jump in terms of integrated graphics. I mean, you're having to, for free. Well, essentially, you have a pretty significant jump in graphics performance and an overall CPU performance. So it's exciting to buy memory. It's exciting to buy it at the price that it's at. Now, I wouldn't always recommend doing 16 gigs of memory with a Llano because with a particular motherboard that I tested it with, it had a little bit of a decrease in performance when you went by 4x4 gig DIMMs. It overall performed better with 2x4 gig DIMMs. If you really do need the memory space, it might be better to get some of the new 2x8 gig modules for this particular product. But again, it all depends on the motherboard, because I believe the Asus board that I used, it really retards the latency settings when you use 4 DIMMs as compared to just 2. But if you need 16 gigs, you don't really take that much of a performance hit overall, and especially if you need that kind of density, well, maybe you should look farther than Llano processor for your needs. But anyway, G.Skill made a quality product here. It's inexpensive. It clocked exactly where it's supposed to be. It overclocked very, very well. It's just cheap. How can you go wrong with that?
It's interesting. I think this type of architecture that AMD is pushing on their processors with Llano and probably Trinity, you're going to see more advantages out of that memory bandwidth increase that we get. Like if you look at Sandy Bridge to Sandy Bridge E, you move from 2 channels to 4 channels of memory, and you see huge jumps in SiSoft Sandra results, but really nothing in terms of benchmarks, gaming, or anything really. And just because of the architectural differences, it seems like AMD is being able to take advantage of those things quite a bit more. So hopefully that will increase going forward. We also posted a short video review of a couple of cases from Corsair, the Carbide 500R and 400R. So, I think the Corsair has made quite an impact on the case market since the introduction of the 800D, the Obsidian Series 800D. In 2009, September 2009, so more than 2 years ago now, they've been in the case market, just like it hasn't been that long. And they really didn't introduce wildly, fantastically new things, but what they did was they standardized stuff like the rubber grommeted cable routing and that kind of stuff, and really made a high quality design. They, rather than have, if you kind of look at a company like Antec or Cooler Master or Lian Li, they've had dozens of cases over the years, and they kind of all ran together, right? So Corsair they had the Obsidian series first, they had the 800 and the 700 first, very distinct differences on what was between them, hot swappable bays, that kind of thing. Then they came out with the 600T, and then they've been kind of lowering their price entry point for cases, and now they have the 500R and the 400R. 500R is going to cost you about $130 to $140. I think $130, and the 400R is going to cost you $100 even, maybe a little bit less. And they keep a lot of the same features. They have the cable routing system. They have good airflow in there. They have USB 3 front panel connectors, big backplates for CPU cooler changes, that type of thing. They do a really good job of kind of maintaining some of the key features that make Corsair cases really nice, and doing so for under $100, which is pretty cool. The differences between the two cases are pretty slight, actually. The 500 is the one that has the larger fan on the side, but it only has a single larger fan. I think a single 200 millimeter, and then the 400R has a pair of 120s or maybe 140s on that same panel. And then there's a difference in what radiator support and that kind of stuff up top can handle. And it's not super fancy. There's no really dramatic features to really talk about, but it's a nice case for $100. And if you're not looking to spend $200 or $300, maybe even $350 on an enthusiast class case, this is definitely something to look at. And if you look, go to the website, give our video review a gander, and you'll get a good idea of kind of what they offer for that price point. And I believe, is it the 400R is offered in both black and white, or the 500R? 500R is offered in both black and white, depending on what finish you want there. Oh, I guess, and also I'll point out, it's the 500 that has removable drive cages inside as well if you need more space for longer graphics cards and that kind of stuff. So check that out. What else do we have? Oh, I don't want to say the last. The final Sandy Bridge E processor that was announced in November, we now have posted a review of, the Core i7-3820. Now, I was curious if you guys had any, before you had looked through this review, if you had, what were your kind of predictions about the Core i7-3820? Because it's basically a quad-core Sandy Bridge CPU, which we already have, right? We already have the Core i7-2600K and the 2700K. Those are quad-core Sandy Bridge parts. But they're a little bit different in terms of clock speeds, cache sizes, quad channel instead of 2-channel. So yeah, I mean, without diving too much into the individual benchmark numbers and that kind of stuff, what do you guys think about this part for $285 compared to the $310 to $320 for the Core i7-2600K?
Yeah, but what's the motherboard going to cost you?
That's kind of where the sticking point is. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I cringe at the prices they're asking right now for those things.
$225 is like the lowest priced X79 motherboard you can get.
Yeah, and okay, I can't argue the X79 does bring a lot of nice features to the table, but wow, it's just such a huge jump. It's kind of hard to say that, okay, well, the processors, it performs a little bit better, and they're priced similarly.
If you look at the last page of the article, I kind of do a comparison of if you were to build a Sandy Bridge E versus a Sandy Bridge platform. If you built the 3820 processor, $225 for motherboard, $75 for 4 DIMMs because you need more. You need twice as many DIMMs in order to kind of fill out all the memory slots. Plus, you do not get a default cooler with Sandy Bridge E. So I added $60 in for that. Grand total, $645 just for the CPU, memory, and motherboard cooler. On a Sandy Bridge platform, the Core i7-2700K is $369. So it's actually $80 more than the Core i7-3820. It's $80 more, and it runs at slightly lower clock speeds. I think 100 megahertz lower at all the turbo settings.
But if you're trying to scrimp your change at that point, all of a sudden the benefits the X79 brings to the table, all of those extra PCI slots, for example, you're not going to use them. Honestly, you're not looking at a multiple GPU setup. You're not looking at, throwing in an OCZ Revo drive in there because you don't have the money. You're looking at, lower mid-range to mid-range. You're not building a
that's
dream
true. But
system.
I mean, so if you look, a Z68 motherboard is going to cost you, let's say, $100 less, $80 less, if you want like the same kind of feature set as you would get on the lowest end X79 board. So it's kind of offset by the cost difference in the 3820 to the 2700K. But it does, the Sandy Bridge platform comes in at about $100 less than Sandy Bridge E. But Sandy Bridge E, for $645 as the base, you get more flexibility for multi-GPU systems, for adding in things like a Revo drive. Now, I agree, somebody who's interested in a Revo drive may not necessarily be the person who's just trying to find the cheapest parts possible. But a $285 processor and a $225 motherboard are not the cheapest parts possible, but it makes a really good base, I think, for a high-end system. I don't know, Alan, so if you were a user that maybe was planning on using SLI or Crossfire graphics, if you wanted to get something like a Revo drive, what do those start at in price? $300?
Yeah, they're right around 300. But
you'd see a performance difference going from a by-4 connection to like a by-8 or a by-16, right? With something like that?
For the Revo, no. It's not going to see any. You won't get anything else.
A by-4 would be just as much as.
Yeah, because the card itself is a by-4, I'm pretty sure. So that's it. That's where you top out. And you can get by-4 on even one of the auxiliary, the more off to the side slots of even like an You
The
know,
ones that go
or
through
like
the
a
chipset.
Z, like a Z board. You know, not even like a, you know, you could have an Halem board. And
Right.
just still,
Yeah. So
yeah.
I guess it comes down to, do you think that the Core i7 3820 is the new Core i7 920? Or
You know, that's
is
actually
it,
that's what I was sort of thinking about as we were going through this, because back when that CPU was the hot thing to buy, and it was only like $300 or even less, the platforms
and the
were
X58
still
motherboards were more
250.
expensive then too, right?
Yeah, they were 250,
Yeah.
but people would just they would still plunk their money down for it, myself included. You know, I'm still
Mhm.
running on that same system. That's my main rig. Is my
Well, I'm talking to you
original
on a
original board that I
920 as
got
well.
with the Core i7 920. Yeah, it's just that was the way to go, right? So if you're already biting the bullet on doing if you're already committed to a whole upgrade anyway, then you're probably better off, you know, just going with whatever motherboard has the better features and the better, you know,
Yeah.
if it's like an extra $50 or an extra $80 at that point, you're already committed to spend $600. Just like how that 920 was when it came out. If you wanted to move to that, you were committed to like at least $550, right?
I would like to say that I don't have an i7 920, but I also ate lead paint chips in my youth.
Explains a lot, actually.
Yeah.
You know, somebody in the chat is saying that the i7 2600K is the new 920, and I don't know if that's just based on like the popularity of the part. You know, a couple more details on the 3820 just before, you know, we finish the discussion. It is not a fully unlocked part. The 3960X Extreme Edition part that's $1,000 or more, and the 3930K, which is a $550 part that I was unable to find for sale even today, is a fully unlocked part. What the difference is, you're only supposed to be, just like all kind of locked Sandy Bridge processors, you can move the multiplier up a maximum of 4 steppings. So if the maximum turbo speed of this processor is 3.9 gigahertz, which it is, the maximum speed you can go is 4.3 gigahertz. You know, and if it's 3.5 gigahertz with all cores enabled, or 3.6, then you're maxed out at 4 gigahertz. But because Sandy Bridge E introduces the idea of the CPU strap, or these kind of multipliers for the base clock, you have the ability to run at higher speeds within those multiplier limits. So, you know, I was able to get my 3820 to run at 4.62, 4.63 gigahertz all the time, you know, all cores overclocked, just by enabling the 1.25x multiplier, 125 megahertz strap, whatever it is. It's going to vary based on the motherboard BIOS, enabling that and maxing out the multiplier. And that was with Intel's own DXSI DX79SI motherboard, which has actually really good kind of overclocking capability. You just, where it says overclocking assistant there on the screen, I set that to 1.25x profile, and it automatically adjusted the voltage, the thermal limits, and that kind of stuff for you. And you set the max core multiplier up to, you know, 37, whatever the highest it'll let you set it at, and that you can run stable at. And I was able to get 4.63 gigahertz, which is a pretty good boost. That's a gigahertz over the base clock of the processor. So there's something to be said for the non-K processors of Sandy Bridge E, there being only one of them, I guess. 4.63, I think, would be more than enough overclocking for most people. And that was using the Intel branded, you know, integrated or self-contained water cooler as well. It is. I thought this was interesting.
Intel board.
What's that?
That's a pretty good showing from an Intel board. Just the fact
It
that
is.
it's
The Intel motherboards have done a great job recently, starting with the X58, of really kind of adopting overclocking. They still have those, you know, warranty warnings all over the place. Also interesting. I thought this was interesting personally. It's a completely different die. This part. This is not a 6-core CPU with 2 more cores disabled, because we know the 6-core CPUs are actually 8 core parts with 2 disabled. This is actually a completely new die, so it runs much cooler under load as well, which is actually really nice.
It makes me wonder if it's going to be the start of a slightly new family. Like Intel's done it with the Core i3s, where you've got the HD 2000 ones and the HD 3000 ones sort of running with very similar model numbers. Mm-hmm. You know, could this be the beginning of, hey, right now it's pretty cool, So we mature the process a little bit. We can start ramping up the speed a little bit more and more and start selling them. It'd be interesting to see.
Yeah, because I mean, the base clock on this part is 3.6 gigahertz. The base clock on the Extreme Edition part is 3.3. Now, the turbo speeds are the same, so you're not, the single-threaded performance of this part is exactly the same as the $1,000 part, which is also interesting to note. If you have applications that are using 1, 2, 3, 4 threads, they're going to perform as well or better on this $285 part as they do on the $1,000 part. It's only on the applications that can really take advantage of 6 cores, 12 threads that you really see the difference there. And it's a big difference for me. I don't think we're going to see many more Sandy Bridge E processors. There's the debate of which socket is going to have the most longevity. If you buy an LGA 2011 socket or an LGA 1155, current Z68 boards should be able to support Ivy Bridge chips when they come out. Ivy Bridge is not going to be a huge CPU improvement. It'll be more integrated graphics, processor graphics improvement. So if you're like a gamer enthusiast, you're going to use discrete card anyway. That may not be that big a deal. An Ivy Bridge E, which will probably fit into the same socket and work on these motherboards, probably, Intel hasn't said yes or no on that, will be in the similar vein, right? So I think you'll have similar lifespans from this point forward for both LGA 1155 and 2011. But you never know, right? I mean, X58 existed for a long time before it was replaced. We saw several other kind of moderate performance chipsets in that regard. But I think either way, it's a really compelling option. It's not going to be available until probably February. This was kind of like a preview review style thing. They just wanted to get that information out there before CES, but it should be available sometime in February. So be on the lookout for those when they go on sale. I'll be curious to see how popular they are, how many of them Intel can ship and get out there, and if they. I'm sure the motherboard manufacturers are really looking forward to it because they would love to sell more X79 motherboards than they have so far. Yeah, there you go. What else did we get? Oh, this was a review that we posted the video. I posted the video on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/PCPer, of course, already, even though we haven't posted the review on PC Perspective's website yet. Just because I wanted to get the video out there, and I wanted to talk about it now because by the time we get to CES, it'll probably be something that kind of gets lost in the shuffle. Cooler Master revealed the Cooler Master 2 Cosmos 2 case, and this thing is enormous. I mean, if you look at the video, it's the same scale of all the crap behind me right now, and you see how big this case is. They created a new term. What do they call it, Jeremy? The
Ultra.
Yeah, the Ultra Tower. It's not a mid tower or full tower anymore. It's an ultra tower, and it is a huge case. It has all kinds of awesome features. It has swinging doors. It has front panel that slides down. The power buttons have LEDs in them. There's an integrated fan controller. There's an integrated LED controller. 6 front panel USB ports. 2 of them are USB 3 compartments, compartmentalized kind of cooling inside everywhere. You can see once you open up the door there, there's room for 13 hard drives in there, but you can change things around. So like you can take the 5 that are kind of in the main area of the case, you can remove those and have more space up there and just use the 6 on the bottom, kind of where the power supply is, or you can take those 6 out where the power supply sits, and you can actually mount a 240 millimeter radiator down underneath there for CPU cooling, GPU cooling, whatever it is you want to do. And you can still mount a 100 or a 240 or even a 360, like a 3-panel radiator up top of the case as well. So I mean, this case has all kinds of amazing features. It's really impressive. It weighs about 50 pounds empty as well.
And it doesn't have casters on it, which it really, really should at that size.
It doesn't have casters. And even worse than that, it has rubber feet on the aluminum bars on the bottom of it. So
good luck sliding that around.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking, because I have the original Cosmos as my case in the other room here, and the benefit there is it's got those bars and you can kind of slide it around on the carpet or like linoleum or hardwood. They in the reviewer's guide for the case, they say they don't want people to do that because it will damage the aluminum bars. I get that, but lifting it up to reposition it even the slightest bit is really hard to do, especially because you're reaching over. It's not like you're lifting straight up. You're reaching over, and if you put a couple of video cards in there and 4 or 5 hard drives and all that kind of stuff, especially if you do water
and install Skyrim on it, it's gonna weigh real heavy.
Skyrim's so heavy, so heavy.
Yeah.
Well,
it'll accept an XL ATX motherboard.
Oh,
so
yeah, it has 10 expansion
ridiculous on the amount of expansion cards that are in there.
10 expansion slots, and then it has that +1, which I thought was kind of a cool feature. It allows you to, if you have an audio breakout or an extra fan controller or what am I missing here? It'll support PCI expansion or riser cards as well. So you can have that back panel plate installed on the case without it taking up one of the spaces for where an actual add-in card could go. So it's pretty cool case. It's going to have a retail price of $350 though, which is kind of not awesome, I guess. But it's not completely outside the realm. There's filters on every intake area. They did a good job with this case. It was well thought out. The door. I was kind of debating earlier if I would rather the doors have opened on hinges to the back of the case as opposed to the front of the case, just so maybe you could access it, the inside of it without having to completely open the door. I don't know, but it's it's a well put together piece of hardware. So check out that review. It is up on youtube.com/PCPer. If you get this immediately, if you're watching live, hopefully it'll be up by the time this podcast is up, posted on the website as well. So give the Cooler Master Cosmos 2 Ultra Tower a look. Let's go ahead and, since I forgot earlier, stop here for our obligatory advertising break to thank our sponsor. All right, thank you for that. Let's get into a couple of news items here. Alan wrote a little editorial here on hard drive warranties. So hard drive businesses had a string of bad luck, let's say, recently. They had a flood, knocked out their inventory, raised their prices, made me angry, and now they are slashing warranties on hard drives. Kind of upsetting me again, but you're here to make me feel better, Alan.
Not for a little while. Yeah, so pretty much across the board, hard drive warranties starting at the beginning of this year have dropped from 5 years, depending on the model, all the way down to anywhere between 1 and 3 years, average being 2, pretty much. So I did some digging around, and as I was looking at all this stuff, I realized that it's been like this up and down cycle, really. So hard drive, the warranties will go up, and it turns into like sort of this arms race or megapixel race or whatever you want to call it for, over the course of a few years. Hard drives in aggregate all look pretty much the same, right? They're just this block of aluminum that stores bits, right? And it costs so much money, and there's not a whole lot of numbers for manufacturers to play around with. Most of the time, the only thing that they got into a quote-unquote race with in the past was just RPM, right? Because you don't see a lot of people looking at, maximum read rate or, people sort of wised up to, don't go by the interface, just go by the speed of the platters that, loosely translates to how fast the drive's going to be. So with nothing else to really push up, they sort of got in this little nudging race of warranties. So the warranties kept going up and up. And then right around the same time that pretty much across the board, everybody started reintroducing green series drives, which was actually just an excuse to make the platter speed slower again, because heat issues were causing drives to fail or just have reduced lifetimes, or they were just pushing the envelope too far. So they just increased the density of the platter at the same time they reduced the spindle speeds. So yeah, there was a little bit of a hit to seek times, but your sequential throughput ended up still being like an improvement. We saw when 2 terabyte caviar greens came out, that was actually an improvement in throughput. And then when the black series came out later, it was even more improvement, obviously. But at the time, it was like a step down in speed, yet the throughput went up. So with all that going on, between that and a reason, marketing pushing for, well, we need some reason to sell our drive versus the other guy, and the fact that they could get away with increasing warranties because there were reducing the wear and tear on the drive just by slowing down the spindle speeds, they sort of got in this little race. Well, then you had flooding in Thailand. And think about all the things that causes, right? So first it was the hard drive prices going up because of supply dropping, and all the way to the point of companies like Intel had to report a loss or a projected reduction in output of their CPUs because OEMs couldn't make systems fast enough because they couldn't fill in the missing piece for their system, which was the hard drive, right? So this huge, ripple effect all the way across the industry happened from this. But I think there was a separate ripple effect off to the side, was that my theory is that hard drives were so cheap before that it was to the point where if somebody had a failed hard drive, they just throw it on a shelf and they're just like, okay, maybe I'll try to do data recovery off that thing someday, whatever. For whatever reason, they just sort of stick it on the, put it off to the side and just were buying a new one because you can get them for what used to be dirt cheap. What I think happened was a bunch of people cashed in on those 5-year warranties when that happened. They saw hard drive prices double, some cases triple. They look over at that shelf. They're like, hey, I've got a couple of these 2 terabyte hard drives that failed on me. Let me RMA those guys. So between that and it wasn't just like people more likely to use their warranty when their drive fails. I think there was actually like a little bit of an overflow. Like people just had them sitting on a shelf and use that as an excuse to get another drive, or get, instead of spending what would be twice as much on that drive. So between all those things, I think the manufacturers were just like, look, there's just a little bit too much of a stranglehold on us right now. We're trying to deal with all this. I think it's time to cut back on the warranties and make them a little more reasonable. And there was this Google study that happened. This was years ago that this one came out. I think it was like 2005. It came out in 2007. But it covered drives from 2001 to 2006. And this is Google. This is like, hundreds of thousands of these hard drives from all manufacturers that they had in use. And they did this huge statistical analysis of just, hey, how are all these failures happening? What's some data that corresponds to when they fail, how old they are, and whatnot? And there were big jumps when you go from it's like starts at 3% in like the first few months, which is just really infant mortality, like those components that just aren't installed, slightly off kilter a little bit, and something that's gonna fail. It's probably gonna fail within the first few months of use, but then that drops down to like less than 2% per year failure rate. Then it gets, when you hit the 2-year mark, it makes this huge jump, and it jumps up to 8%. Now, granted, this was years ago when they did that study, but I'm pretty sure that still applies today. I don't think there were any huge market, improvements in mechanics for hard drives, right? Sure, they increased the density, they did all these changes, but a lot of hard drive failures, they're not so much electronic as they are just mechanical. The hard drive starts doing the click of death kind of thing, and something happens.
I don't know. There have been some real improvements in lubrication over the past 5 years.
Well, yes. Actually, there have been some other complete changes, right? Because when this Google study was done, most of these hard drives were rolling on ball bearings. For the platters were actually, it was like, miniature ball bearings, like similar to what you see in like a model remote control car or something like that. Now they're all using fluid dynamic bearings. But the thing is, it's still a bearing. It's still gonna, the liquid is not a perfect seal. Whatever the oil is, it's gonna dissipate over time. A hard drive is not something like your car where you can change the oil, right? You can't just pop the lid on your hard drive and re-lubricate all the moving parts.
You can't change the head when it crashes?
Well, that too. Now, that's the same across the board from old hard drives to more modern hard drives, right? But the fact that you still the major moving parts, they're still bearings, right? They're not using some kind of crazy nanotech to make these moving parts last any different amount of time. And you can actually sort of equate it straight over to a car, right? If you buy a car, you could probably get away with driving it for a year and have like a 2% failure rate. But you drive it for 2 years and never open the hood, ever, on the car to do any kind of maintenance, you're probably going to start seeing more failure rates, like 8%. Same kind of thing, right? You can't serve as a hard drive. It's not a practical thing. So I think it really doesn't matter what the hard drive is. You should expect that kind of a jump in a failure rate between the 1 and 2 year mark. So that sort of makes sense for if they're going to, you know, where's our bottom line on warranties? Where is it that we have to win against our marketing guys and tell them, okay, look, guys, we can't pull off this 5-year warranty thing. It's messing up our bottom line. They probably back it down to something more reasonable, like between 1 and 2 years. It just sort of makes sense. And I think, give it like a year or two, it's going to have to swing back the other way, because then you're going to have hard drives competing more heavily in even cost per gig over the next, you know, between 1 and 2 years from solid state. And pretty much all the solid state drives out there have 5-year warranties, because there's no moving parts, and there's really no reason for them guys to drop their warranties either, right? There's just, if anything, their warranties are just going to get better, because they're just putting more capacity on the die, even though you might argue that, okay, well, the write cycles are going down every time they do a die shrink. You can only write to it so many times. It doesn't matter when they double and quadruple the capacity per die, and your typical person is just not going to write that much to it, right? So when you start getting into like a 1 terabyte solid state drive for a reasonable cost, it doesn't matter if it's flash memory that can only handle like 500 cycles versus what used to be 10,000, right? Because
and you've seen the studies where if you're dealing with a 2 terabyte drive plus, there are already bad heads.
There's already bad sectors.
And
yeah,
they will continue to grow. There's nothing you can do about that. You were talking about, you know, the scale for those little tiny magnetically aligned head, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, the grains? Yeah.
Yeah, the grains.
Or the domains, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, there's billions and billions and billions. They break.
Yeah, your typical hard drive is getting errors. It's just happening. This is actually it's the same exact thing for an optical disc. An optical disc, while it's reading, gets like hundreds of errors per second. Especially if it's like a DVD or a burn DVD. It has an error rate. It just gets corrected at different layers, and you never see it on the computer side because it's just nested layers of error detection and correction. Hard drives nowadays are doing the same thing. It's actually the whole reason advanced format started to catch on, was because they needed more bits for error correction, and they're like, well, okay, how do we work this in and make it efficient? The best way was, okay, we can't have error detection and correction just for each individual sector. We need to make this a little bigger. That's why advanced format does it in groups of 8 sectors or 4 kilobytes. And the only reason they set it to that was because it neatly falls within the NTFS cluster size, is just same kind of deal. And actually, that's I don't know if
there's
they're
no
gonna
sound,
like,
but I know exactly what sound that's making.
Yeah. So they were showing on the video version of the podcast. There's a video. Someone took the lid off of a hard drive.
There it is.
Failed. Yeah, there you go.
What's all that? All my hard drives sound like that.
Yeah, I know, right?
No wonder you can't get a RAID to work, Ryan.
with your luck, Ryan. Yes, all your hard drives pretty much end up doing that.
Fine. Yeah. You're right.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, we'll move on. That's enough hard drive technical information, I think, for the podcast. Actually, I have a question on the email section, so pay attention to that. Other graphics card rumors here. AMD Radeon HD 7700 series details leak. Obviously, these are unofficial. These are all rumors, blah, blah, blah. So Tahiti is the 7970. Pitcairn is going to be the 7800 series, and Cape Verde is the 7700 series of graphics cards. 28 nanometer GPUs, the new AMD series, blah, blah, blah. So what's interesting is, if these rumors are correct, the 7700 series will move from 2,000, just over 2,000 stream processors down to 896, 14 compute units, with a clock speed of 900 megahertz, which is still pretty high. The memory system will be 1 gigs on a 128-bit memory bus, which is actually a significant drop. We're going from a 384-bit to a 128-bit memory bus. So, yeah, and then the 7750 would be 832 stream processors. And then So you're seeing a little bit more than half stream processors and a third of the memory bandwidth. And then finally, the idea here on the 7800 series PIC camera would be it would include a 256-bit memory bus. And although they don't have any kind of counts there, we assume it would be somewhere between the 7900 and 7700 series in terms of core counts. Josh, I mean, do you have any thoughts on this? Is the drop from 384-bit memory to 128-bit memory going to be really, really significant with the shader count here?
Not so much. Well, I mean, you're going to see a drop off no matter what. I mean, this is a product that is going to be replacing the HD 5700, well, the 5770 and the HD 6770. Both were the same chip. So you've got slightly more stream processors that are more efficient. You got more hardware that's doing more interesting things. You have a slightly more efficient memory controller. So it's going to be a better product than that. But it's essentially replacing it. And so, yeah, you're not going to see a huge jump in performance from the previous generation, especially with that, the width of the memory controller. The HD 5770, I believe, was running at 4.8 gigahertz. So it's a small jump because I think this is going at like 5.2, 5.4 gigahertz. So, yeah, you're going to have an increase in performance from the previous generation, but it's not going to be the jump that we have seen, say like going from the 6970 to the 7970. That was a pretty significant jump. We're not going to see anything quite like that, I believe, with this. Yeah, it's going to be more efficient. It's going to be able to do more things more interestingly, but it's not going to be a quantum leap forward at that price range. In fact, it's kind of going to be a little bit backwards because a 5770 or a 6770 is going to be about $110, and this is going to be offered at $150, $160. So price performance, you're not going to see a whole lot of difference, but it is going to be next generation technology. You may be able to overclock it more. It is the GCN architecture, so it looks to be more efficient than what we have seen with the previous versions and generations products. So, it's going to be a positive. It's going to be a step forward, but it's not going to be a jump.
All right. So this is something that they're rumoring for February, March timeframe. So we'll see how all that kind of progresses. The other rumor, this is actually, I think, much less likely to be true. It's kind of weird. There were these documents going around. They were build documents from Sapphire, actually, that found their way onto the internet, as things tend to do, and they kind of mentioned some interesting things. First, they mention Radeon HD 7970s, 2048 shader processors, running at clock speeds as high as 1335 megahertz. Keep in mind that the reference speed, the ones that we tested, are 925 megahertz, and those are listed on the sheet as well as reference speeds. So it would seem that the Atomic RX version of the Sapphire card could possibly be released with a clock speed of 1335 megahertz, which is 44% faster, 44% higher than the 925 megahertz, which is a lot. Like that would change performance numbers really, really dramatically. So let's say that's true. The more interesting and controversial information here is that it lists something above the HD 7970, not a dual GPU card, though. It actually is listing a part with 2,304 stream processors. Now, you think that's weird because the 7970 has 2,048. 2,304 is actually 36 compute units, 36 complete 64 stream processor-based compute units. So the first thought was, okay, so obviously the reason AMD didn't give us a die shot with the 7970 is because they're not fully. Well, AMD swore to me that this is not the case, that Tahiti is being utilized fully as a 7970. It is 32 compute units, and I have other knowledge that that is indeed the case. Somebody has verified, let's put it that way, that is indeed the case, that the Tahiti chip that we all have is and we all, I mean, all the reviewers out there have, is a 32 compute unit chip. So, with that knowledge, and with the fact that these documents kind of leaked out, and they seem fairly realistic, if they're fake, somebody did a crap ton of work to get this right. That there is a 36 compute unit part out there that will run at 1,000 megahertz reference, that Sapphire will have a 1.225 gigahertz overclocked version. What are the possibilities
it's
here?
So easy to add another 4 compute units. It's just a piece of cake to just toss them.
Yeah, that's the thing, is it's not, right? You're right. It's not easy at all to do that. AMD can't just slap that on there, say, here TSMC, make this now. This is something that had to be planned out long ago, 18 months, 24 months ago. And this means that either AMD has this other chip and they've done a freaking amazing job of keeping it secret, keeping it away from the press, keeping it away from NVIDIA so that they didn't have to change their targets, or AMD had this part, decided that yields were piss poor and canceled it, or power just blew out of what their expectations were late in the game. Because I mean, there are other pictures that kind of go with this leak that we didn't really publish here in the story that show build diagrams for other boards. So I mean, these are build documents from Sapphire. So I'm not really sure what to think of it, other than to say that either AMD had or has another GPU waiting in the wings with 36 compute units instead of 32 compute units.
Well, how about this?
Okay.
Let me put my hands in the air and talk to you in a very expressive manner.
Oh, please do.
See the expression flowing from my hands.
I do. I see.
Okay, so we have a design that when you come to terms with TDP and target speeds, 36 compute units would just put it way over the top, because even now, even though this is considered a 250 watt TDP part, the previous 250 watt 6970 still does not pull as much power as this particular product. So, chopping off those 4 compute units, but still having that, I mean, you get better yields, obviously. You're able to better hit the TDPs. And let's say 6 months from now, TSMC has improved its process. Your engineers have worked with their engineers. They've had lunch. They've done all the wonderful things together. They've skipped through patches of posies. And suddenly you get to the TDP areas where you can re-enable these extra 4 compute units and have a product at 6 months refresh that is going to be significantly faster than what you see here in January. Do you think that that may possibly be a potential?
So you're basically
problem?
saying that they have built this, but they're just holding back on.
If Sapphire is releasing documents that look this good, well, not releasing it, but leaking it, that it is a possibility. I mean, maybe we're looking at a new kind of not so much process of technology, but a thought process of, hey, let's way over design this chip. Let's look at what NVIDIA did with the GTX 480. They're able to refine a bunch of extra stuff with it. They came out with the GTX 580, fairly soon afterwards, and it's a significantly better part. Let's overshoot these TDPs. Let's cut some of these CU units off, compute units out of there, and we'll hit some marks. We'll still have a better product overall. It'll be next generation, but in 6 months, once everything has improved in terms of technology and process manufacturing, that we can release this new part that's going to have all these extra CU units, and it's just going to be so much better. So, I
hope so.
Yeah, it'd be really kind of a cool thing that AMD has done, because there still needs to be a lot of work.
And the reason they would want to keep this super secret, right, would be that 7970 comes out, NVIDIA goes, okay, here's our goals. We want to beat that by 20 or 30 or 40% or whatever it is. And AMD has this super secret thing that is maybe now less super secret. that they could then answer with in May-ish timeframe or something like that, right? It says, oh, well, now we're this much better than you again. And NVIDIA goes, I give up. I don't think that'll happen. But, that's the idea, right, is that you get that they would have this item back there. So I don't know. I'm very curious to see if this actually pans out to be the case. It's kind of been circulating a while, and it could be that this was a part that flopped and we'll never see. I hope not. I hope we see it. Could be pretty sweet. That's it. No, wait, there was one more news item. Jeremy, you posted this up. What is a Shamino?
Well, a Shamino is somehow made seemingly a living off of professional overclocking. What we do for fun, he makes money off of, much like, say,
people
Fatality.
think that about us, honestly. So.
Yeah, we don't. That's why we're here selling ourselves.
I thought Shamino was a bicycle parts manufacturer.
I thought he was a Ranger in Ultima. But
well, what is he
regardless,
really?
This is a man who took an HD 7970 and he ripped the custom cooling off of it and threw a nice little LN2 pod on top of it. And after,
So neat and clean looking.
well, as I say, he's a professional. But after a little bit of work, he managed to drag that poor little 7970 up 84%, I believe it was, above stock speeds. So sitting at 1700 megahertz. Managed to shatter the single GPU extreme overclocking 15,063 points on 3D Mark 11, which is
the extreme setting.
Godly. It's
performance 15,000.
Because that is usually what benchmark competitions like MSI's, the Master Overclocker, that's what they set it for. As well on Vantage, he pulled a slightly less impressive sounding 54,725 because on Vantage 5 points is a big thing. It's scores much higher than 3D Mark 11 and sort of takes away a lot of the victory, at least in my opinion. Right. But hey, it looks like this 5970 or this 7970. I'm going back a year here. Is going to be something that's going to be on this circuit for a little while for overclockers, because this is not even a month after they've started to let people get their hands on it. And as drivers mature, as people get a little more experienced as to what this thing can handle and what it won't, and how to trick it into getting a little bit more, I don't think 1700 is going to stand. I think we're going to see higher, and it's going to be interesting. At least for the benchmarkers, because it's really hard to play a game and be pouring LN2 into the graphics card at the same time.
You gotta have a buddy. An LN2 pouring buddy, I think, is what you have to have. One last bit of news actually just kind of went live as we're recording this. The Lenovo unveils ThinkPad Ultrabook, an ARM-powered laptop ahead of CES. It is the top story at PCPer.com. For those of you in the chat room that would like to see it. So what are we looking at here? Taking the wraps off the Lenovo ThinkPad T430U, which blends thin design and durability. Where are these specs at? Oh, here they go. The ThinkPad X1 Hybrid is based off the current X1 and includes a feature not yet seen in consumer PC laptops, a dual-core ARM processor built by Qualcomm. Don't get too excited yet because the ARM processor doesn't run Windows. That task is left to the typical Intel x86 processor. It does, however, run a secondary operating system called Instant Media Mode, that allows users to access the web, watch videos, and perform other basic tasks. Lenovo claims that
my motherboard does that.
The Instant On stuff. Lenovo claims that using IMM instead of Windows allows for 10 hours of life on the X1's relatively small battery. Owning such an exotic piece of hardware will cost you starting at $15.99. So I'm sure, Josh, you can go with this. The Intel will be ecstatic to hear that Qualcomm has a processor inside a Lenovo laptop.
They must be really, really happy with Lenovo. But of course, Lenovo is owned by those folks in China, so they don't listen to anything because they have that Godsend or Godfrey or whatever RISC processor that they're trying to, take some server space from and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
So they don't care. Honey Badger don't care.
Yeah, exactly. So the back to the Ultrabook, I guess the 430U has a 14-inch display starting at $849, which is actually a pretty good price for an Ultrabook. I think the cheapest you can get, the Asus ZenBook, is still $1,000, right? So,
and if it was Lenovo, it would be 12.
Well, $849. Here you go. Specifications include third-generation Intel Core processors, optional NVIDIA discrete graphics, mechanical and SSD storage options, battery life up to 6 hours, which is not great, and an island-style keyboard similar to ThinkPad X1. Thickness will be no more than 0.8 inches, and weight will be under 4 pounds. Pretty slick-looking laptop based on the photos there on the site. So
is this ARM able to touch the system RAM when it's running in place of the CPU?
I would guess not. I'm guessing it is very much like, kind of like the instant-on operating system that you get with some of those motherboards, like Jeremy mentioned, actually.
So then the whole
it doesn't say.
So then the whole reason, assuming that's the case, the whole reason they're launching it ahead of CES is because CES is going to be chock full of Windows 8 ARM stuff.
I don't know. I'll be very curious if that. I've heard more and more reports that ARM is proving to be less and less impressive. Basically, I guess is what it comes down to. We'll see. I mean, that will be the thing to decide is how much are people pushing that and promoting that for 2012 at CES, right? So we'll know in a week or less.
Apparently, we're going to see a couple of tablets based on the AMD Z01 processor, which is their really ultra low clock, low voltage. What is it originally? Ontario Bobcat based, dual core 80 stream unit. Is it 160 or 80? I can never remember.
I don't know.
Anyway, but yeah, there's going to be some tablets out there running that, and while they may not match ARM in terms of battery life, they're going to be able to run Windows 8 and other stuff like that.
So we had a few emails lined up here as well, podcast@pcper.com, but because we're running late and I'm tired and we have to have a little CES, a last minute before CES staff meeting, I will answer the emails very quickly. Nabokov Fan 87, yes, you'll be able to get 7970 reference cards day of release on January 9th. Tom asks about 7970 Crossfire. I don't know. We haven't tested it yet. We will let you know that hopefully next week as well, talking about performance benefits there of 7970 Crossfire. And Mike, okay.
He bought an off-brand SandForce 1222 based SSD, and they don't have like a firmware update for it. And that's one of those ones that you should probably update the firmware so it doesn't accidentally brick on you later.
Good. Okay.
That whole issue. Best thing I could say is keep backing it up and keep checking.
So he cannot use another vendor's drive. He thinks it's a rebranded ADATA S599. Can I use that firmware?
I would never do that. If the drive shows, if it, like under Windows, if you pull up like your properties of your disk and it shows up as a different model than the ADATA, then don't even try. It's not worth the risk.
There you go. Not worth the risk. Okay, let's get into our hardware software picks of the week. I have a good one this week. This is a Transcend. Here we go. This is a Transcend. Focus. There we go. USB 3.0 super speed multi-card reader. And we deal with a lot of memory cards here at PC Perspective. We record lots of video on our 7D camera. Oftentimes we'll have 2.5, up to 4 gigabyte video files, depending on how long I yammer and misread things. So it's very important that we have fast transfer speeds. Well, let's be realistic. What was our transfer speeds on our memory card readers before, Ken? Maybe 10, 12 megabytes per second. And that was kind of what we were maxing out. So transferring let's say a 2 gigabyte file, let's say, what do we get, 8 gigs per project, maybe, something like that. It's a good average. Transfer 8 gigs of files over to a computer through USB 2 was like, it was bad. Let's just say it was bad. This little device turns out to be very helpful. It was, what did I buy for? $19, $20 on Amazon. There are now several available. This one had the best reviews. One of them I read said it couldn't read 32 gig compact flash cards, which wouldn't work. So $19.36 with Prime shipping if you are an Amazon Prime member. And we could transfer the 2 gigabyte file very quickly, I believe at an average between 85 and 90 megabytes per second. So we're talking about an 8 or 9x speed improvement for the media that can handle it. Now, that being said, media that can handle it is the result there. I think that card was a 400X compact flash card, which don't ask me to translate what those numbers actually mean. But we have some other ones, Kingston ones, that are 233X. 133.
1X is like 150K per second. It's the CD-ROM standard.
That makes total sense. I'm glad we still use that standard. 133X Kingston cards, and they transferred the maximum of 20 and 25 megabytes per second. So you still have to have the memory speed to take advantage of it. But if you do, you want to make sure that it's not your crappy USB 2.0 card reader. These devices are great for $20. That's my pick.
Thank goodness we finally are seeing USB 3.0 devices.
And cheap.
That do something.
I know. Jeremy, what do you got?
Cheap.
Well, I got something that is relatively cheap anyways. NCIX, a very famous Canadian retailer, is currently shilling the OC Agility 3 240 gigabyte SSD for essentially $300 if you count the stupid mail-in rebate. Essentially, you're going to drop $370, including tax, and get $30 back on it if you can show up in store, if you're in Canada. It's also $9 cheaper than what you can find on Newegg right now, plus shipping. So check out the shipping from NCIX, and you might get it for just a bit cheaper than you would on Newegg. And there's plenty of stock. I've already ordered mine. It should be here Thursday or Friday, and I'm looking forward to finally playing with a decent SSD.
Cool.
And the mail-in rebate, by the way, is an American Express prepaid card.
It's as good as cash. That's what their commercials used to tell me.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's better or worse. Josh, what do you have for me? You.
You know, I'm so far behind the curve. It's not even funny. Last year they released the Kinect. This year I finally bought one, and I think they're great. They've updated the firmware. They've done all kinds of things with the software. They've updated a lot of the games. Things just damn work. They work really damn well. They just damn work. Or something. But anyway, oftentimes Newegg, if you keep track of it, they've got these things for $99, brand new. It comes with 3 titles. I was playing Gunstringer with my children the other day. May not exactly be appropriate, but it's still fun. It's powered by the Beard rather than Unreal. And it's your move, Unreal, as he scratches his beard. But anyway, it's a lot of fun. And for $99, you can add it to your Xbox, either your previous generation or the current S generation. Works great. You know, I set up in there and calibrated like the wind, and it's amazing what you could do to yourself and have it show you exactly. It's terrible. But anyway, yeah, it's, you know, if you got one, I'm not saying buy consoles, but hey, if you're a PC gamer, it's a nice thing to do as well. So there you have it. Kinect. It's a lot of fun. Plus, you can plug it into your computer, do a lot of really, really interesting things. A lot of interesting things. Like measure glacial flow. Crap like that. Do something useful with your life instead of just play games. Like me. I mean, look at me.
Yeah, really exciting.
Yeah.
I have a Kinect. It was really cool was. I don't know. I want more hacks to come out with it. Otherwise, it's just not going to be useful to me.
Do you have two 9-year-old little boys?
No, and when I played Dance Dance Revolution, all the blinds are closed.
Yeah.
Oh, so you do it
yeah.
alone.
I got two little kids.
All the lights
Boy,
are off and the blinds are down, and Ryan is just rocking
That was like
out.
when I was in a rock band. You only play the guitar and sing with the Aerosmith scarf on the microphone stand when the blinds are closed too. Don't you guys all do that? Seems pretty normal to me.
I still don't own a console.
Alan, save us. What is your pick?
My NES died.
Something like 70 or 80 podcasts ago, my pick of the week was an iStar USA hard drive cage. It was it mounted into a CD-ROM size bay, so a 5.25 inch bay, and it held 4 solid-state drives that were 2.5 inch. So that was pretty cool. And they made 2 different models. One had a fan and some extra lines so that it could also provide 12-volt power to the hot swap bays. But that was mainly for if you were going to put some kind of SAS hard drives in there or server class things, right? So the cheaper model didn't have fans in the back. It was whisper quiet, no moving parts. But it was just really meant for serial ATA and more specifically for solid state drives, right? And it was like $50 or something at the time. Well, fast forward to now. And actually, I had no idea about this until one of our listeners and followers extraordinaire, whatever you want to call those guys, Pat Richards, passed this on to me. iStar USA now makes same exact kind of deal, except it's 6 bays. So somehow they squeezed an extra 2 hot swap bays into a standard 5.25 inch enclosure. So this is a 6 solid state drive into 1 CD-ROM size bay deal. And basically on the back of it, there's 6 serial ATA ports. You wire them in. It's almost a perfect lineup if you think about most motherboards that have the Intel chipset with 6 serial ATA ports right on it. You just go one for one, hook them all up, and slap in 6 solid-state drives if you want to be so bold. And that's it. Then they make a similar to what they did before. There's 2 different models. It's a little bit tricky, though. You sort of have to know what you're looking for, and you can't really go by their website or even the reviews on Newegg. Nothing really is very clear on what's in what. So here's the deal. There is a BPU TAC 126 TAC SA model. If it just says SA at the end and that's it, that's actually the more bulky model that has fans built into it. And by the way, the fans are really loud. So don't just do it because if you're going to put nothing but solid state drives in this, that is really meant for like a 2U chassis, something that's going to sit in a rack in a server room. It's going to make a lot of noise. So that one is more expensive. It's like $90. However, there is a BPU TAC 126 TAC SA and then TAC SAGE 25P. So if it has like a bunch of extra letters at the end of it, contrary to what you might think, that's actually the model that does not have the extra fans and does not provide the extra power for SAS hard drives and drives like Velociraptor and stuff like that. So that's really your perfect deal, or should be your perfect deal for if you just have SSDs to put in this, or just laptop, like standard laptop 2.5 inch hard drives. You can put them in there too. Keep in mind, if you go throwing 6 of them in there and you don't have some kind of decent ventilation, some kind of air moving around in your case in general, that might start making things pretty hot. Stick 6 7200 RPM laptop drives all in a really close proximity. It's going to warm up. That said, this enclosure is aluminum. I think the trays are aluminum as well. And it does have vent holes all the way around it. So if you have any kind of air circulation around your the bays of your case at all, it's probably going to get sufficient airflow for this, and you'll be just fine. So yeah, 50% more bays for similar cost. This is going for like $65 on Newegg right now.
There you go.
No mail-in
all
rebate.
Right. What's that?
No mail-in rebate.
No mail-in rebates. Very good. That is going to wrap up the show for us. The first show of 2012. 1-888-38 PC Pro. We did get a couple of voicemails in. One of them was really long. and please avoid that. I try to keep it to 20 seconds or less, that we get right to the question. We love to play those, but we
have a short attention span.
What was that?
We have
90
a short
second
attention span.
90 second.
I got that.
Thanks. 90-second voicemails aren't going to work. Podcast at pcper.com. Same idea there. If you have, a 7-paragraph email, chances are I'll read it and go, that's a really interesting problem that I can't address on a radio show type format. So again, kind of keep it short and sweet. And we'd love to help you guys out. pcper.com/podcast is the URL you should give to everyone that loves PC hardware. You think they should love PC hardware, or just loves Josh. That's the URL to go to for all that. Twitter.com/PCPer, Facebook.com/PCPer, YouTube.com/PCPer is where you can get that kind of sneak preview video of the Cosmos 2 Ultra Tower case that will probably find my system in it at my next upgrade. I think I will probably use that. Seems kind of like a waste because I'll probably have 2 hard drives in it. Maybe we'll use it for a server or something here. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
I'll pass you my old 4-bay one. I ordered the new one.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. What we need is more cases in this office as I look at the wall of cases we have over here. It's really kind of depressing. So that's it. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Join us. Our goal is to have a podcast up every night that we are at CES, starting with Saturday night. So Saturday night we will get there. Was it? No, and so we'll talk about. We'll use Saturday night's podcast as a kind of a test trial. So expect to see more podcasts in your RSS feed, and it's a good time to subscribe. Just go to pcper.com/podcast and get all the iTunes link or the RSS feed, whatever you need for that. And it's a good time to subscribe because we'll do Saturday night. We'll kind of cover anything that we wanted to talk about between Thursday, Friday. Well, it's not very many days, is it? We'll just cover whatever needs to be covered. We'll talk about what a great dinner we had Saturday evening. And then Sunday, we'll kind of get started with storage technology stuff, which will be the focus on Sunday. And then Monday, the shitstorm begins. And you'll never know what we'll say because we'll probably be tired and have a few drinks. Josh won't. Josh never drinks, but the rest of us.
No, my liver is on strike right now, and plus I'm still recovering from pneumonia, and I just can't drink anymore.
So that's gonna wrap it up for this week. We will talk to you very soon. I'm Ryan Shrout.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Josh Walrath.
And I'm Alan Malventano.
Happy New. No, I already did that one.
Yeah,
Bye.
And I'm not going to CES.